Hi there, my friends. We are in the last section of Chapter 6. We are almost done with beginning algebra, or introductory algebra, whatever we're calling it. This is section 6.6 from Robert Blitzer's Introductory and Intermediate Algebra for College Students, and I am Professor Shannon Gracie from Maricosta College. Today we'll be talking about solving quadratic equations by factoring. So important. When you're done with your homework, you should be able to use the zero product principle. Notice, zero product. No -1 product, no 256 product. There's only a zero product. Because if you recall, 0 times any number is 0. So there's a very, very powerful tool that we can use called, the zero product principle to solve quadratic equations. We will use our factoring skills to solve these equations, these quadratic equations, and then we'll solve some applied problems using quadratics. So go ahead, pause the movie and do the warm-up, and I'll be right back. Alright, let's see how you did on the warm-ups. So the very first one, factor. So if we do our friendly x, we have an overall product of +7, and -8 is what we get when we combine like terms. So positive means that we have the same sign, which means this is the result of addition. So the two numbers we come up with are -7 and -1. So here we go. This yields a result of x squared minus 7x's minus 1x plus 7. So we have our middle term has been broken up into -7x minus 1x. And we have our red group. That wasn't red at all. We have our red group and we have our blue group. So when we factor the greatest common factor from the red group, which is x, we are left with x minus 7. And then be careful, we'll factor out a -1 and be left with x minus 7. So this was the results of the red group here, and the results of the blue group here. Now we did come up with a common binomial factor of x minus 7. So to complete the factorization, we will have a result of x minus 7 times x minus 1. How'd you do? I bet you kicked butt on that one. Oh no, I said that out loud, didn't I? Guys, I apologize. It's late and Professor Gracie is having a glass of wine along with the lesson tonight. Okay, so here's kind of a blast from the past. This is, I believe, a chapter 2 concept. We're solving a linear equation in one variable. So remember our goal here. We've got an x to the 1 and we have no other variables. So we want to isolate the variable. We will add 7 to both sides and we will get x is equal to 7. And roster notation, meaning that 7 is the only answer that will work for our variable x. I bet you did a fabulous job on the warm-ups. How do you feel about those? I mean, after all those hard problems we've been working on, I bet that was a lot easier. Okay, here we go. Definition of a quadratic equation. A quadratic equation in x is an equation that can be written in the standard form ax squared plus bx plus c. And remember, we were dealing a lot with that in factoring, but now there's an equal sign, and it's equal to 0. Where a, b, and c are real numbers with a not equal to 0. Otherwise, we would not have something that was quadratic in form. A quadratic equation in x is also called a second degree polynomial equation in x. All right. So here we go. Solving quadratic equations by factoring. So consider the quadratic equation x squared minus 8x plus 7 equals 0. How is this different than the first warm-up? So if you recall, in the first warm-up we had x squared minus 8x plus 7, and our job was to factor it. So what do you think? How's it different? Well, good, yes. There's an equal sign. That means, we'll be able to solve for the variable x. Aren't you excited? Okay, so here's how you do it. We can factor the left side of the quadratic equation, x squared minus 8x's plus 7, to get x minus 7 times x minus 1. If a quadratic equation has a 0 on one side and by the way, can I just emphasize that? 0 on one side and a factored expression on the other side, it can be solved using the zero product principle. All right, the zero product principle. If the product of two or more algebraic expressions is 0. Notice, 0. 0, only 0, no other number. Are you getting a clue as to mistakes people make? It has to be 0 on one side and a quadratic on the other. Then, at least, one of them is equal to 0. So, in Mathies, what we have is, if A times B equals 0, then A must be 0 or B must be 0. So, okay, don't flip your page yet. Hang on. Let's check it out. Let's go back to our warm-up, and let's, instead of keeping it just to factor, let's equate it to 0. So it's a new problem that we've equated to 0. Now, what you found from your warm-up is that the left side factors as x minus 7 times x minus 1, and that's equal to 0. Now, what that zero product principle says is that, hey, this factor, notice that each of these are factors right, that I've kind of grouped right here, they're each factors. So what that means is that either x minus 7 is 0 or x minus 1 is 0. Or both. Hey, that works too. So if you solve, adding 7 to both sides, which I think we did already, you get x is 7. And then in the second one, you'd need to add 1 to both sides. So make sure, your skills are good with your solving linear equations in one variable. And you get x is 1. And then, hey, in our roster notation, meaning that only a result of x equal 1 or x equals 7 will satisfy the quadratic equation. So you've solved your first quadratic equation. How do you feel? I bet you feel fabulous. Here we go. Solve the following equations. So I will leave you, pause the movie and do at least A and B. And if you feel very, very confident, go ahead and do part C as well. On your mark, get set, go. Okay, let's see how you did. Part A, we need to add 11 to both sides. We have a quadratic equation in one variable. So we will get 2x is equal to 11. And then if I multiply by 1/2, then I will get 1x, which is x, is equal to 11/2. And then over here, I'll write in my roster notation, I'll write the result of 11/2 and put my happy box around the solution. Part B, I need to subtract 1 from both sides. There we go. And then I will get x is equal to -1. And then in the roster notation, we will get -1. Now, okay, so that was earlier stuff, chapter 2 stuff, which hopefully you feel like you have mastered. Part C, you're just adding another teeny little layer. It's just a little bit that you're adding. Now, you use that, what was it called? It starts with a Z. It was a property. You got it, the zero property. We're using the zero property to solve something that's going to end up being quadratic in form. So here, I've got, each of these are factors, and they're equal to 0. So therefore, to solve this equation, I would set 2x minus 11 is 0, or x plus 1 is 0. Didn't we just solve those up there? So notice that each of those had a single solution for x. Well, now they were multiplied together and they were set equal to 0. So the solution for these is going to be both. So I put them in ascending order. So -1 and 11/2. So you end up with the two solutions found the same way as we found up there. I mean, do you see this was 2x minus 11 is 0, and that's what we found here. So we used our zero property to solve a quadratic. I bet you feel fabulous right now. All right, here we go. All fun aside. Here are some steps for solving quadratic equation, a quadratic equation by factoring. If necessary, rewrite the equation in standard form. And this is important. A lot of times people get so excited they decide to make up their own 2 property or -8 property. They forget to get 0 on one side of the equation, right? So the standard form is ax squared plus b times x plus c equals 0. There's got to be 0 on one side. Moving all terms to one side, thereby obtaining 0 on the other side. Factor starts with an F. It's not a bad word, I promise. Apply the zero product principle, setting each factor equal to 0. Solve the equation set forth in the last step. And it's always, always, always advised to check these solutions in the original equation. I'm going to leave the checking to you guys, all right? But that's a great last step. Okay, here we go. Solve, all right? Can I just warn you guys about something? Your exam is going to be comprised of chapters 5 and 6. The last page of your exam has you solve quadratic equations. You will not find a value for x, and the other ones you'll be factoring. So don't make up your own math and start solving equations earlier in the exam. It's only the last page, I promise you. Okay? A lot of times people get so excited with their factoring skills and then now their new solving equation skills using the zero product principle that they decide to apply the zero product principle to everything. Don't do that. Please, please don't do that. Okay, here we go. But now we can, because we have an equal sign and we have 0 on one side. And guess what? We have one factor, two factors. So we say, oh, x must be 0, or x plus 9 must be 0. Now we are down to a linear equation and one variable. So this one's done. The x is isolated. This guy, we got to subtract 9 from both sides, and we get a result of x is equal to -9. So the result for the overall quadratic equation will be -9 and 0. You put your happy box around your answer, and you're done. Okay. Next up, factor, and most importantly, 0. So we're good to go. That means that 8 is 0, or x minus 5 is 0, or 3x plus 11 is 0. Okay, now I told you I'd had a little wine, but even I know that 8 is not 0. So guess what? That must not be the 0 factor, and we throw it out. Alright? Now, coming to this guy, if I add 5 to both sides, I will get a result of x is 5. And then, let's complete this guy. Subtract 11 from both sides. I will get 3x is -11. Now I need to multiply both sides by 1/3. And I will get 1x, which is just x, is equal to a -11/3. So, at the end of the day, my answer is -11/3 and 5. Both of those will satisfy the equation. Okay, here we go. Now we're getting into the meat and potatoes of what's going on. Right. Are these factors? No. Good. These are terms. We have not gotten these into factored form. So what you need to check for, there's 0 on one side. So I've got a 0. So that's awesome. Okay. But here, you know what? It starts with F. It's not a bad word. You got it. We need to factor this bad boy. So you're going to use your mad factoring skills. There's an overall product of -42. A difference of +1. The two numbers that fit the bill are -6 and +7. I'm going to factor by grouping. We will get x squared minus 6x's plus 7x's minus 42 equals 0. My middle term was rewritten like so. I've got my red group and my blue group. Sound familiar? Now, factoring from my red group, I get x times x minus 6. And then plus 7 times x minus 6 equals 0. See, that equals 0 is the different part of what's going on. So, completing the factoring, I have a common binomial factor of x minus 6. I will factor that out. I have x minus plus 7 equals 0. Now, what is that property? You got it. The zero product principle. Okay, so what does that mean? I can set each factor equal to 0. And on the first one, I'll get x is equal to 6, or x is equal to negative 7. So in my roster notation, I've got negative 7 comma 6. And those two solutions for x satisfy the equation. Okay, now D, I gotta tell you right off, is a bit of a sucker problem. People want to divide out x's. Don't do it. You need to get 0 on one side. At this point in your math life, just get 0 on one side. That will help you. So we will have x squared minus 8x's is 0. Factoring, we'll get x times x minus 8 is 0. Using the zero product principle, we'll have either x is 0 or x minus 8 is 0. Again, that is the zero product principle. And solving, the first one is already solved. To isolate x in the second guy, we just need to add 8 to both sides, and we get an end result of either x is 0 or x is 8. Awesome. Okay. Now, if you haven't done so already, I would advise that you pause the movie and try these on your own. Just remember, you need to have 0 on one side, and you need to have everything in factored form. So again, if you haven't done so already, pause the movie, see how you do. Okay, on your mark, get set, go! I know you can do it. Okay, let's see how you did. Now part E, I don't have 0 on one side. That's all I know. So I'm going to subtract 12x and add 9. You can do it one at a time if you like that better. I will end up with, alright, so this will give us, in descending powers of x, we'll have 4x squared minus 12x's plus 9 is equal to 0. Now when we make our x over here, the overall product, be careful, is 36, because we're doing the 4 times the 9, that gives us the 36. And then we have a middle product of negative 12, and you know this is positive, so we're going to have a sum to get that middle term, a sum of two negatives. So the two numbers that fit the bill, I believe, will be negative 6 and negative 6. So we will have 4x squared minus 6x's minus 6x's plus 9 equals 0. And then doing, you know, our two groups, we've got red group and our blue group. So if I factor out, I can factor out a 2x from the red group, and I'm left with 2x minus 3. And then if I factor out a negative 3 here, I'll be left with 2x minus 3, and that's equal to 0. So then, factoring out, we now have a common binomial factor of 2x minus 3. So when we factor that out, we're left with 2x minus 3. So this one was a perfect square trinomial. This is the one we factored out. So notice that, you can go through the whole shebang, but notice you're going to get the same result. 2x minus 3 is 0, or 2x minus 3 is 0. So we'll just solve one of them. We'll basically have an answer that's got a multiplicity of 2, which you'll learn about when you go into calculus. So we're adding 3 to both sides, and we'll get 2x is 3, and then dividing both sides by 2, we'll get x is 3 halves. So at the end of the day, we get one answer of 3 halves that makes it work. And again, I'll leave the checking of the result to you. License to kill. You are not spies. You're math students, so you do not have a license to kill, especially you do not have a license to kill your math stuff. So, this is a very, very deceptive problem. We actually need to multiply all this stuff out, move that bad boy 7 over, and get 0 on that side. So, let's go ahead and get 0 on that side first. So then we'll get x plus 3 times 3x's plus 5 minus 7 is 0. Now in order to factor, as I'm sure you well know, we need to multiply all this stuff out. So we're going to have x times 3x plus 3 plus 3 times 3x plus 3. I'm using the distributive property. Minus 7 equals 0. We will get 3x squared plus 3x's plus 9x's plus 9 minus 7 is 0. We'll get 3x squared plus 12x's plus 2 is 0. All right, got 0 on one side. Now, what do we need to do? Starts with an F. It's not a bad word. Factor. You got it. Overall product of 6. Yeah, I bet something went wrong here. Let's see what I did, because it was... Oh, you know what? It wasn't 3x plus 3. Thank you. I'm gonna keep it in there and put it in red. This was supposed to be 3x plus 5. This was a 5. This was a 5. This would give me 3x squared plus 5x plus 9x plus 15 minus 7. So I will get 3x squared plus 14x's, and then I'm going to have 15 minus 7, which is 8. Sorry about that. So here we go. Overall product of 24, positive 24, and a sum of positive 14. So it seems to me like positive 12 and positive 2 fit the bill. So we will have 3x squared plus 12x's plus 2x's plus 8 is 0. So that middle term, the new middle term, 14x, was split into these two. We've got our red group and we've got our blue group. And here we go. We can factor out a 3x from the red group, and we're left with x plus 4. If we factor out a 2, positive 2 from the blue group, we're left with x plus 4, and it's all equal to 0. We have a common binomial factor of x plus 4. Here we go. So we will end up with 3x times x plus 4. Nope, I apologize. Not 3x. We will have x plus 4 is factored out. And then we'll be left with 3x plus 2, and that's all equal to 0. And then we'll get x plus 4 is 0, or 3x plus 2 is 0. And then we need to subtract 4 from both sides for this guy, and we get x is negative 4. And over here, if we subtract 2 from both sides, we will get 3x's is negative 2. Now we got to multiply by 1/3, and we will get 1x, which is x, is equal to negative 2/3. So our end result is negative 4 and then negative 2/3. Okay. Here we go. X cubed minus 4x is 0. Factoring, we get x times x squared minus 4 is 0. We're not fully factored. Be careful. You got a difference of squares. So you'll get x plus 2 times x minus 2. It's all equal to 0. So x is 0, or x plus 2 is 0, or x minus 2 is 0. And then subtracting 2 from this guy, adding 2 from this guy, we will get x is negative 2 and x is positive 2. So our three solutions are negative 2, 0, and positive 2. And we're done. Well, sort of done. We've got one more practice problem, and then we've got an application. And then we'll be done with chapter 6. Woohoo! Okay. We've got a binomial, all right? So we've got something that's considered to be quadratic in form. So this is, on the harder end. Personally, I'd rather just factor it as is. Some people use substitutions. You've got 1 times something squared plus 2 times the same something minus 8 is 0. Okay, so let me write in the 1. So if you were to make your x, your overall product would be 1 times negative 8, which is negative 8, and then you'd have a difference of 2. So isn't that going to be negative 2 and positive 4 to get the right numbers there? Let me do the same colors I've been doing. Okay, so here we go. What does that mean? So we will have x minus 3 squared. Instead of 2 of these x minus 3's, we'll have minus 2 of the x minus 3's, and then plus 4 of those x minus 3's. And then we're going to have our minus 8, and that's all equal to 0. So our middle term was split into these two terms. Okay, so just hang in there. So now we will get x minus 3, the quantity square. Oh, I apologize. We need to start factoring, I guess. So here's our red group, and here is our blue group. So what could we factor out from our red group? Good. One factor of x minus 3. What are we left with? Well, we've got another x minus 3, and then we've got a minus 2. Okay. All right, and then from the second one, I believe we can factor out a 4, and then we're left with an x minus 3 minus a 2. Okay, so this was our red group, and this was our blue group, but it was a little more complicated than normal. If you don't mind, I'm going to do one more step to simplify the inside. So we'll have x minus 3 times x minus 3 minus 2, do you see is x minus 5. Then we'll have a plus 4, and again we'll have another x minus 5, and that's equal to 0. So now we have this beautiful common binomial factor of x minus 5. So we'll get x minus 5, and that's going to be multiplied by x minus 3 plus 4. That's all equal to 0 still. So then simplifying that x minus 3 plus 4, so this again was our common binomial factor. And now I'm simplifying x minus 3 plus 4 to be x plus 1, and that's equal to 0. I now use my new 0 property, and I get x minus 5 is 0, or x plus 1 is 0. When I add 5 to both sides on this guy, I will get x is 5. And on the other one, when I subtract 1 from both sides, I will get x is negative 1. And at the end of the day, I will have negative 1 and 5 as my solutions to this quadratic equation. Okay, so here we go with our application. An explosion causes debris to rise vertically with an initial velocity of 72 feet per second. The formula h equals negative 16 times t squared plus 72t describes the height of the debris above the ground h in feet t seconds after the explosion. How long will it take for the debris to hit the ground? So the ground is at height equals 0. So here we go. We would set negative 16t squared plus 72t equal to 0. Believe we can factor out a negative 16t, and we get 1. And this would be let's see, 16 times, oh, maybe I can't do 16. Sorry, 16 times 5 is 80, so I don't think I'll be able to do 16. Let's try negative 8. I can always refactor if it doesn't work. So negative 8 would give me 2t squared, and then I'd have to do minus 9t is 0. That looks good. So we would get negative 8 is 0, not unless we've been drinking, right? So we cross that out. Or, and this is no longer, this is, guys, okay. Okay, so at height 0 is when you hit the ground. So the way we would set this up is that we would say 0 equals negative 16t squared plus 72t's. So 0 equals, I'll factor out a negative 8t, and I'll be left with 2t minus 9. So either negative 8t is 0 or 2t minus 9 is 0. So t would be 0 or 2t would be 9. And multiplying both sides by 1/2, we would get t as 9/2. Right? So here it doesn't, it doesn't really make sense at time 0, right, for the debris to hit the ground. So I think that we would go with the result of, actually we can say it in words. We would say that it will take the debris nine halves, and that's in seconds, to hit the ground. All right. When will the debris be 32 feet above the ground? Well, what we would do is we would set the height to 32. So instead of the height being 0, we would say 32 equals negative 16t squared plus 72t. But we need 0 on one side, so we'd have to subtract the 32 from both sides. And we would get 0 is negative 16t squared plus 72t's minus 32. And then solving, we'll get 0 is. So we have to factor. Let's see what goes into all of these guys. I believe 8 still goes into all, and I'll factor out a negative 8. And so this would give me 2t squared minus 9t plus 4. So 0 is negative 8. I'll use trial and error since I've got a prime. And my other factors, I need a negative 9t in the middle. So I think if I do 4 and 1, it'll work. And this would be a negative and a negative. So negative t and negative 8t is negative 9t. Perfect. So I'll get negative 8 is 0, which we know is not true. Or 2t minus 1 is 0. Or t minus 4 is 0. Using our 0 property, so that would be 2t is 1. T is 1/2. Or t is 4. So, to answer our question, the debris will be 32 feet above the ground after a half a second and 4 seconds, because it goes in a parabolic arc. So so there's 2 points where you'll get the same, where you'll get something, a number that will satisfy the solution, satisfy the equation. All right, so oh boy, we are done with chapter 6. Have a fabulous, fabulous evening. It is 9/11, and I hope all is well. Bye.